hear us?
I can hear you. I was just had a mix up with my sound. Sorry
Oh,
about that.
all right. Thank you very much for your time. Now, it's been an interesting week in terms of conversations around the performance of African superstars playing their trade in Europe. First of all, we had the issue with Ademola Lookman, where his coach questioned his experience in terms of penalty, leaving as the worst penalty taker. We also had the issue with Mohamed Salah, where Jamie Carragher seemed to have questioned the essence and importance of the AFCON in terms of the Ballon d'Or issues. What do you make of it, of this whole debacle involving Lookman and now Salah? These are the best players. Lookman is Africa's best player. Salah is also in the running to be the best player. He's actually the top scorer and top assist provider in the league. What do you make of this whole conversation surrounding African players and their global positioning in terms of the footballing landscape?
I mean, for the case of Ademola Lookman, I feel the coach was reasoning from a point of being angry that actually a player who wasn't, not that he's a bad penalty taker, but he wasn't first choice at the time. I think there were two players who were ahead of him in terms of the pecking order. But the fact that he rose ahead of the other two and took the penalty and eventually missed it, and it cost them a result. I felt that for me, I felt that the coach was reasoning from a point of being angry that a player who is not in the pecking order can actually take up responsibility when it is not his turn to take up responsibility. It goes down to issues of indiscipline and professionalism. But I don't think that the coach meant what he said. I feel for me it was during the heat of the moment, the anger and all that, and I was forced to say the things that he did say. But I think the two have already reconciled, because if it wasn't the case, probably Ademola Lookman would have been eliminated from the starting 11, but they still retain him in the starting 11 as one of their best players, and he has continued to deliver. So looks like him also as an individual, he has put that behind him and is able to concentrate and actually score goals for them. I mean, he is their second top scorer in the league already, scored 12 goals, if I'm not mistaken. He has been involved in 5 goals. Last season, he scored 12 goals, so he's just 1 goal shy of what he scored last season, and of course, the other season. But above all, without doubt, he's one of those African ambassadors that we have flying the African flag very high
Sure.
in Europe.
Sure. Now, let's look at the Salah situation. First of all, what do you make of the whole conversation regarding Jamie Carragher and the conversations after? Do you think, do you agree with his language, or you think it was a case of where Jamie was misconstrued?
I think it was misconstrued, and in the process of misconstrued, of course, we were offended as Africans that he said what he said. Because from my point of view, trying to understand what he said that if Mohamed Salah is to win the Ballon d'Or, the Africa Cup of Nations wouldn't be the benchmark for him to be considered for the Ballon d'Or. And probably the only problem with his statements is using the word not being a major tournament. I thought for me that was a very disrespectful of Jimmy Carragher. The Africa Cup of Nations are just like the Euros, just like the Asian Cup, just like the Copa America, and all those other tournaments. Is a major tournament, yes, on the African continent. And so many people have jumped on the bandwagon, Joe Button and all that, claiming that the Africa Cup of Nations is not a major tournament, and all that it is only important to Africans. Something that I don't agree. When you look at the statistics in terms of numbers of viewership of the last 3 editions of the Africa Cup
Exactly.
of Nations, I mean, the numbers just keep on growing.
Yeah,
The
true.
previous Africa Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast was broadcast in over
One,
170 plus territories.
true.
You have over a billion eyeballs watching the Africa Cup of Nations, not only in Africa, but in Europe, where these guys come from, in Asia, in America, in South America, where you feel that they shouldn't be having interest. I mean, you have over 30 million views of the Africa Cup of Nations outside the Africa Cup of Nations.
Yeah, all right.
So if those numbers don't make the Africa Cup of Nations a major tournament, then I don't understand what the definition of a major tournament is in the eyes of Jimmy Carragher and Joe Barton and all
Sure,
the rest
sure,
that think
sure.
like them.
We're running out of time, so just a final question. Answer in just 10 seconds. Now, are we seeming to be overreacting, especially when you look at the fact that even when countries seem to win the African Cup of Nations, they do not really get a good shout in terms of the African Player of the Year itself? A case in point is
I
this
think that
year's award.
No, I think for me that is about to change. Yeah, yes, you have all these players being outstanding at with the national teams of the Africa Cup of Nations. But we realize that time and again, the people who get to win these kinds of awards, the Ballon d'Or and the FIFA Best Awards, they are putting in a shift not only with their nations but also with their clubs. Ademola Lookman didn't win the Africa Cup of Nations, but he was very instrumental in guiding Nigeria to the final. But you could also that he was very instrumental for Atalanta the previous season, and of course his club football also gave him an edge. So it's not a case of players not being considered for those individual awards, but you feel that the players have to put in a shift, not only for the national teams, but also for the clubs they play for. That is why people like Victor Osimhen, Ademola
Sure.
Lookman, and all the likes have always gone ahead and probably been recognized for awards like the Africa Cup, rather the best player on the African continent and the likes.
Sure. Very well. Thank you very much, Clive Kyazze, who is a Ugandan sports